She walked into the bank with nothing but hope and her mother's check, a promise of a better future. But instead of respect, she was met with suspicion, sneers, and disbelief. The manager didn't just question her, he tore up the check right in front of her, as if her dreams were worthless. What he didn't know was who she truly was, and who her mother would turn out to be. What happens when prejudice meets power and loses? It was supposed to be just another Saturday morning. The kind of morning where the sun slipped through half-closed blinds and the world felt still. Aaliyah Carter, 22, had spent the last 4 years grinding her way through college, working double shifts at a coffee shop, and saving every tip she could. Her dream was simple: to finally pay her tuition balance and close the chapter that had nearly broken her spirit. She wasn't born into luxury, but she carried herself with quiet pride, the kind that came from watching her mother, Monica, build a life from nothing. Monica Carter wasn't just a mother, she was a force. Years ago, she had started a small consulting firm from her kitchen table, a company that grew faster than anyone expected. But Monica never flaunted her success. She wanted her daughter to learn humility, to earn her victories, to understand that wealth meant nothing without character. Aaliyah respected that. It's why, even though her mother could easily write a check for her tuition, she refused to ask until now. That morning, after weeks of struggling to make ends meet, Aaliyah finally caved. When she told her mother about the final payment due, Monica simply smiled and handed her a folded check. "You've worked hard," she said. "Now go finish what you started." Aaliyah looked at the amount, $10,000. Relief and gratitude flooded her chest. To her, that check wasn't just money, it was validation. Proof that her effort had meant something. The drive to the bank was short, but filled with thoughts: her graduation, the job she wanted, the new chapter about to begin. She even rehearsed what she'd say to the teller, hoping she wouldn't stumble over her words. The city buzzed with its usual rhythm: honking cars, people rushing, life moving fast. But Aaliyah's world felt slow, peaceful. She didn't know that behind those tinted glass doors of the bank, her sense of peace was about to shatter. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and floor polish. The lobby was pristine, the kind of place that made you straighten your posture without thinking. Aaliyah walked toward the counter, clutching the check carefully, as though it might dissolve if she loosened her grip. Behind the counter, a middle-aged man in a crisp navy suit glanced up, his expression unreadable. His name tag read Mr. Hayes, branch manager. Aaliyah smiled politely and waited her turn. There were only a few people in line, most of them scrolling through their phones or checking watches. She tried to ignore the subtle shift in the manager's gaze when it landed on her, how his eyes seemed to linger a second too long, assessing, judging. She felt that look before. It was the quiet, familiar sting of being doubted before she even spoke. But she brushed it off. Today was supposed to be good. Today, she was depositing her mother's check, proof that hard work paid off. She told herself not to overthink it. Not everyone was out to make her feel small. Still, as she stepped forward and placed the check on the counter. A faint unease crept into her stomach. Something in Mr. Hayes's tone, the way his polite smile didn't reach his eyes, made her heartbeat quicken. She didn't know it yet, but that moment, standing there with her mother's check, was about to become the line between her old life and the new one. Aaliyah had walked into the bank with hope and pride. She would walk out with something else entirely. A harsh reminder that no amount of success or grace could protect her from the ugliness of prejudice. And somewhere, in a quiet office across town, Monica Carter, the woman the world would soon discover was a millionaire CEO, was about to find out how far one man's bias had gone. Aaliyah slid the check across the counter with a small smile, trying to hide her nervousness. Mr. Hayes barely glanced at it before looking back at her. His lips tightened. His tone changed. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice calm but cutting. She blinked, caught off guard. "It's from my mother," she said softly, her hands still resting on the counter. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned the check over in his hand like it was contaminated, his eyes narrowing at the signature. The lobby seemed quieter suddenly. Even the sound of the printer behind the counter stopped. He looked up at her again, longer this time. "Your mother wrote this?" Aaliyah nodded, her chest tightening. "Yes, Monica Carter." His eyebrow lifted slightly, and the disbelief was almost tangible. He tapped a few keys on his computer, pretending to check something, but Aaliyah could tell he wasn't verifying, he was doubting. Each click felt like a silent accusation. Minutes passed. People in line shifted impatiently. A woman sighed. Still, Mr. Hayes didn't process the check. Instead, he leaned forward and lowered his voice. "Do you work for Mrs. Carter?" The words hit like a slap. Aaliyah froze. For a second, she didn't even understand. Then it sank in he thought she was the help, not the daughter, not someone deserving of a $10,000 check. Someone else's employee, maybe a maid or assistant, trying to cash what wasn't hers. Her throat tightened. "No," she said quietly. "She's my mother." He exhaled sharply, almost scoffing. "Uh-huh." He picked up the phone. "I'm going to have to verify this." Something cold spread through her. She wanted to protest, to tell him there was no reason to doubt her. But the way he looked at her made the words die in her throat. That quiet, superior smirk told her everything. He wasn't verifying the check. He was verifying her right to exist in this space. As he made the call, he turned his back to her. Aaliyah stood there, feeling smaller by the second. The whispers started behind her, small, sharp fragments she couldn't fully hear, but understood completely. "She looks nervous, probably fake. You can't be too careful these days." Her face burned. She wanted to disappear, but she stood her ground, clutching her bag, heart pounding. When Mr. Hayes hung up the phone, he didn't say a word. He simply stared at the check again, then slowly, deliberately tore it in half. The sound ripped through the silence like a scream. again. 4 neat pieces fluttering onto the counter. Aaliyah gasped, stepping back. "What are you doing?" His voice was flat. "We don't cash fraudulent checks here." Fraudulent. The word echoed in her ears. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. She tried to speak, to explain, but he turned away, as if she wasn't even worth the argument. The guard near the door glanced over, his posture changing, ready, waiting. Tears welled up, hot and angry. "That's my mother's signature," she whispered, her voice trembling. "She owns Carter Dynamics." He laughed softly without turning around. "Sure she does." The people behind her looked uncomfortable now, but no one said a word. No one stepped forward. Just silence. The kind that stings worse than the insult itself. Aaliyah gathered the shredded check with shaking hands, her breath coming fast. She wanted to scream, to demand respect, but her voice wouldn't come. It was like the moment was designed to remind her that no matter how good she was, how hard she worked, she would still be questioned. She left the bank without another word, the weight of humiliation pressing down on her like a storm. Outside, the bright sunlight felt cruel, mocking. People walked past her, unaware that she was standing on a sidewalk with torn pieces of her mother's check in her hands, pieces of dignity she couldn't tape back together. But as she drove home, her silence turned to fury. She replayed every second in her mind, the look, the tone, the smirk. And beneath the pain, something began to harden inside her. What Mr. Hayes didn't know was that his small act of arrogance had just sparked something far bigger. Because Monica Carter wasn't the kind of woman who let injustice slide. And when she found out what had been done to her daughter, the storm that would follow would shake that bank and its manager to the core. Monica Carter arrived at the bank just after noon, calm on the surface, but burning inside. The call from Aaliyah that morning had shattered her. Her daughter's voice had been trembling, humiliated, broken in a way Monica had never heard before. She didn't shout or demand explanations over the phone. She just said 6 words that carried decades of pain and power. "I'll handle this myself. Stay home." When Monica walked into that same bank, the room shifted. Every step was measured, every glance calculated. She wore a simple gray suit, nothing flashy, but the kind that whispered authority. Her heels clicked against the marble floor like a countdown. The same manager, Mr. Hayes, was standing behind the counter, laughing with a customer. He didn't notice her at first, but when he did, his face stiffened. "Good afternoon," Monica said evenly, her voice smooth but cold. "I'm here to speak with the branch manager." He smiled the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "You're looking at him. How can I help you?" Monica paused, looking around. The same spotless floors, the same sterile smell of money and coffee, the same invisible tension that her daughter had felt hours before. Then she placed a folded piece of paper on the counter, a duplicate check, newly printed from her company account. My daughter was here yesterday, she began. She tried to deposit this. For a moment, silence. Mr. Hayes's eyes flicked down at the paper, and realization flickered in his expression. A faint, nervous laugh escaped him. Oh, well, we get a lot of, suspicious checks. I'm sure it was a misunderstanding. Monica's gaze didn't waver. A misunderstanding. You accused her of fraud. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. A few tellers stopped typing. Customers turned. The hum of conversation faltered. Mr. Hayes shifted, tugging at his tie. Ma'am, please lower your voice. We can discuss this privately. But Monica didn't move. No, she said quietly. I think this conversation belongs out here, in the open. She pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. Within seconds, a man in a tailored suit approached from the entrance, her company's head of legal affairs. Behind him, 2 local reporters, notified earlier that morning, lifted their cameras. The room seemed to freeze. Mr. Hayes's composure cracked. This isn't necessary, he stammered. We can resolve this. Resolve. Monica's tone sharpened, years of restrained anger bleeding through. You tore up my daughter's check because she was black. You didn't see a young woman trying to deposit her mother's hard-earned money. You saw a stereotype. You saw someone who didn't belong. He opened his mouth to protest, but she didn't let him. Do you know how many times we've had to prove ourselves? How many doors we've had to break down to be treated like we matter? You didn't just insult my daughter. You insulted every person who's ever been told they don't look like success. The room was silent, except for the soft click of a camera. Monica turned to the nearest teller. Please deposit this check. Same amount, same account. The young woman hesitated, then nodded, hands shaking slightly as she processed the transaction. The printer hummed, the receipt slid out, and Monica took it without looking back at Mr. Hayes. She turned to leave, but paused. You know, she said, her voice low but cutting, you tore up a check worth $10,000 yesterday. Today, that mistake will cost your branch a whole lot more. Then she walked out, the crowd parting silently as she passed. Behind her, the whispers began. The tellers exchanged glances. Phones came out, and Mr. Hayes stood there pale, sweating, realizing too late that his arrogance had just made headlines. As Monica stepped into the sunlight, her daughter waiting by the car, Aaliyah's eyes filled with tears, not of shame this time, but of pride. For the first time, she understood the kind of power her mother carried. Not the kind printed on checks or locked in offices, but the kind born from pain, dignity, and the refusal to stay silent. And yet, as Monica looked back at the glass doors of that bank, she knew this wasn't just about them anymore. It was bigger, because in a world that still measured worth by color, every battle fought was one step closer to justice. But the real question lingered. Would anyone finally learn from it? For days after the incident, The video of Monica Carter confronting the bank manager spread across the internet like wildfire. At first, it was just another clip shared, commented on, debated. But then the story caught fire. News outlets picked it up. Hashtags formed overnight. People were outraged, not just because a woman's check was torn in two, but because it revealed something far uglier, something that went beyond that marble-floored lobby. In interviews, Monica never raised her voice. She didn't have to. Her composure, her quiet confidence, said everything. My daughter wasn't humiliated because of a mistake, she told reporters. She was humiliated because of a mindset, a disease we still refuse to cure. Those words echoed far beyond that bank. Within a week, the branch manager was suspended pending investigation. The bank released a carefully worded apology, but for Monica and Aaliyah, it wasn't about punishment. It was about exposure, about shining a light on what so many experience in silence. Aaliyah went back to that same bank one last time, not to cash another check, but to close her account. She walked through those glass doors differently this time, head high, unshaken. People stared, whispered, recognized her. But she didn't care. She knew who she was now. She wasn't just the girl whose check was torn apart. She was a symbol of something greater, the reminder that no amount of money, status, or education could erase the bias she faced. But it could give her a platform to fight back. Monica, meanwhile, started something new. With her resources and influence, she launched a scholarship program for young Black entrepreneurs named after her daughter. She wanted the next generation to not only succeed, but to be unshakable in their worth. Because success, she knew, wasn't about proving yourself to those who doubted you. It was about lifting others who never got the chance. Still, the scars remained. For Aaliyah, that day at the bank was a moment she could never forget. Every time she walked into a professional space, she carried it with her, the reminder that perception could still outweigh truth. But instead of breaking her, it fueled her. It taught her to see through the polished smiles and polite tones. It reminded her that respect wasn't given freely. It had to be demanded, over and over again. And for every Aaliyah in the world, there are countless others, unseen, unheard, turned away, doubted for simply existing in spaces they've worked to reach. That's the quiet cruelty of racism. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers in the smallest gestures, in the way someone looks at you, questions you, erases your dignity without ever saying a word. But stories like this remind us, silence only keeps the cycle alive. When people speak up, when a mother refuses to stay quiet, when a daughter refuses to bow her head, change begins. It's slow, it's painful, but it begins. Because no policy, no apology, no corporate statement can erase the truth that hearts must change before systems ever will. As the months passed, the world moved on to the next story. But Monica and Aaliyah's moment didn't fade. It lingered in boardrooms, in classrooms, in quiet conversations between parents and their children about what dignity really means. Sometimes, justice doesn't come from punishment, It comes from awareness, from forcing people to look at what they'd rather ignore. And maybe that's the power of their story, not revenge, but revelation. Not anger, but awakening. Because every torn check, every quiet humiliation, every misunderstanding, like this one, exposes a truth we can't keep pretending isn't there. So ask yourself, how many more times will we let prejudice decide someone's worth? How many more daughters must stand in silence before the world finally sees? And when that next moment comes, will we be the ones who look away, or the ones who stand up and say, enough?